The typewriter clicks echo through a cold Scottish barn. A man dying of tuberculosis wraps himself in blankets, fingers trembling over the keys. Each word costs him breath he doesn't have. His publisher begged him to stop, to rest, to save what little life remained. But George Orwell kept typing. 7 months after the book's publication, he would be dead at 46. He knew this. He typed anyway. Across the Atlantic, another writer sits in a university basement, feeding dimes into a rented typewriter. 10 cents buys 30 minutes. His daughters bang on the garage windows at home, and he cannot afford the distraction. So Ray Bradbury comes here to this underground library and writes about a world that burns books. The mathematics of desperation, $9.80 for 49 hours of work. The mathematics of prophecy, priceless. And in California, a nearly blind man squints at pages his wife reads aloud. Aldous Huxley can barely see the words of the novel that just arrived. Orwell's 1984. But what he sees disturbs him enough to write a letter that will haunt literature forever. His hands shake as he types his response, predicting that Orwell's nightmare of boots and torture will give way to something far more insidious. A nightmare of pleasure so complete that no one will want to resist. 3 men, 3 visions of hell, 3 books that refuse to stay fiction. In the 2020s, something strange happened. Sales of 1984 exploded. Not because of an anniversary or a movie adaptation, but because people looked at their smartphones, their smart speakers, their Ring doorbells, and felt a cold recognition. The book stopped being a warning and started being a mirror. Some whisper that these 3 books, 1984, Brave New World, Fahrenheit451, were never meant as warnings at all. They whisper that politicians and corporate boards read them as instruction manuals, blueprints for control so elegant that the controlled never realize they're in chains. But here's what haunts me most. In Orwell's final letter to his publisher, dying in that Scottish barn, he wrote 6 words that should be carved into every smartphone, every social media app, every device that watches us while promising convenience. Don't let it happen. It depends on you. The question isn't whether these writers predicted the future. The question is whether we're living in the future they feared, and we're too entertained, too surveilled, too comfortable to notice. Let me show you how 3 desperate, brilliant men saw what we refused to see. The island of Jura sits off the western coast of Scotland like a forgotten stone. Harsh, remote. Beautiful in the way that loneliness is beautiful. In 1946, George Orwell came here to die. He didn't put it that way, of course. He told people he needed quiet to write. But his lungs were already failing, tuberculosis eating through tissue with the patience of rot. He knew. His doctor knew. His publisher knew. What none of them knew was that Orwell would use his dying breaths to type the most prophetic novel of the 20th century. The house, Barnhill, sat at the northern tip of the island, accessible only by a dirt track that destroyed car suspensions. No electricity, no telephone. Just Orwell, his adopted son Richard, and eventually a sister to help care for the boy. And that typewriter. Always that typewriter. Orwell's publisher, Frederick Warburg, was frantic. The author was supposed to be resting, recovering, preserving what little health remained. Instead, reports came back. Orwell was working 12-hour days in an unheated barn, wrapped in blankets, coughing blood into handkerchiefs. Warburg sent a nurse to the island, not to help with the manuscript, but to keep Orwell alive long enough to finish it. Here's the detail that breaks my heart. Orwell couldn't afford to hire a professional typist. This man, who would write one of the most important books in human history, was too poor to pay someone to type his manuscript. So he did it himself, every word, while his body consumed itself from the inside. The irony cuts deep. A novel about human subjugation, about the destruction of individual dignity, written by a man whose poverty forced him to work until it killed him. The medium was the message, and the message was suffering. He finished the manuscript in December of 1948. The book was published in June of 1949. By January of 1950, George Orwell was dead. 7 months. That's all he got to see his masterpiece exist in the world. But before he died, he wrote that letter to Warburg. 6 words at the end. Don't let it happen. It depends on you. Not a prophecy. A plea. The book almost had a different title. Orwell originally called it The Last Man in Europe, a title that captured his pessimism about individual freedom surviving the 20th century. But Warburg convinced him that commercial titles sell better. They needed something catchier, something that sounded like news rather than philosophy. The popular theory about the title goes like this. Orwell finished the manuscript in 1948, so he reversed the digits to get 1984. Neat, tidy, probably wrong. Orwell never confirmed this. What we do know is that 1984 sounded far enough away to be speculative, close enough to be threatening. The perfect distance for a nightmare. But some details in the book aren't speculation at all. They're memory. Room 1. O1, the torture chamber where Winston Smith faces his greatest fear, was a real place. Broadcasting House, Portland Place, London. During World War II, Orwell worked for the BBC, creating propaganda broadcasts for the war effort. And in that building, there was a conference room numbered 101, where Orwell was forced to sit through interminable meetings about editorial policy and broadcast standards. For Orwell, that room represented something worse than physical torture. It represented the slow death of the intellect through bureaucratic compliance, the torture of boredom, the erasure of self through endless, pointless obedience. When he wrote about Room 101 in 1984, he wasn't imagining hell. He was remembering it. The character of Julia, Winston's lover, the woman who represents brief rebellion before inevitable betrayal, was based on Sonia Brownell, who would become Orwell's second wife. They married in October of 1949, 3 months after the novel's publication. 14 weeks later, he was dead. She read him reviews of his book as he lay dying in a London hospital, unable to move, unable to write back to the critics who either praised or condemned his vision. Did he die satisfied? Did he think the warning would work? We'll never know. But I suspect he knew the truth. Warnings don't work when people are comfortable. So where did this vision come from? What turned a former colonial policeman into the prophet of surveillance? Start with Burma. In the 1920s, Orwell served in the Imperial Police in Burma, modern Myanmar. He was an enforcer of empire, a tool of oppression, and he hated himself for it. Years later, he would write that those years taught him the dirty work of empire at close quarters. He saw how power dehumanizes both the oppressed and the oppressor. He saw how easy it is to make cruelty routine. Then came Spain. In 1936, Orwell joined a Trotskyist militia fighting in the Spanish Civil War. He believed in the cause, fighting fascism, defending democracy. But what he found was betrayal. The Soviet-backed communists turned on their leftist allies, including Orwell's militia. Propaganda newspapers rewrote events he had witnessed personally. He watched as history was falsified in real time, as allies became enemies overnight because Moscow said so. This was the seed of 1984, the rewriting of history, the insistence that the party's version of reality was the only version, even when it contradicted yesterday's version. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. But Orwell had another teacher in manipulation, his own employer. During World War II, he worked at the BBC producing propaganda for the Eastern Service, broadcasting to India. He learned how language could be weaponized, how truth could be massaged, how information could be shaped to serve power. He learned that propaganda doesn't require lies. It just requires the careful selection of which truths to tell. And then there was the Blitz. From 1940 to 1941, Nazi Germany bombed London relentlessly. Orwell watched his city burn. He saw how fear changes people, how easily populations accept restrictions on freedom when they're terrified. He saw how war becomes permanent, how enemies become interchangeable, how "we've always been at war with Eastasia" stops sounding absurd and starts sounding normal. And he read Yevgeny Zamyatin's We, published in 1924, a Russian dystopia about a city of glass where privacy is illegal and all citizens are numbered instead of named. Orwell reviewed We in 1946 and called it a study of the machine, the genie that man has thoughtlessly let out of its bottle and cannot put back again. That review was written on Jura, while he was planning his own novel about machines that watch and control. All of this, Burma, Spain, the BBC, the Blitz, Zamyatin, poured into that freezing barn on Jura and came out as 1984. Now here's the uncomfortable part. What did Orwell get right? Telescreens. He imagined devices in every room that broadcast propaganda and watch citizens simultaneously. You cannot turn them off. They monitor your facial expressions for signs of disloyalty. In 1949, this sounded like paranoid fantasy. In 2026, facial recognition technology has 99% accuracy. Your smartphone knows where you are at all times. Smart speakers listen for wake words, but keep the microphone on. Your TV can track what you watch and report back to advertisers. Facebook can identify your face in photos you didn't upload. The screens are here. We bought them voluntarily. We carry them in our pockets. We get anxious when we forget them at home. Orwell predicted surveillance. What he didn't predict was that we would beg for it, pay monthly subscriptions for it, defend it as convenient. Newspeak, the engineered language designed to make certain thoughts unthinkable by eliminating the words to express them. Orwell understood that controlling language controls thought. Don't you see that the whole aim of Newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thought crime literally impossible, because there will be no words in which to express it. Look at algorithmic content filtering. Look at information bubbles. Look at how social media platforms create linguistic tribes, each with their own reality, their own vocabulary, their own truths. You don't need to eliminate words when you can make sure people never encounter ideas outside their bubble. Newspeak doesn't require a government ministry. It just requires an algorithm optimized for engagement. The Ministry of Truth, where Winston works, rewrites historical records to match the party's current narrative. Newspaper archives are constantly updated. Photographs are doctored. Inconvenient facts are erased. He who controls the past controls the future. We do this now. Digital archives are mutable. Articles are updated without noting changes. Search results are personalized. so different people searching the same term see different pasts. Wikipedia edit wars determine what gets remembered. The Internet Archive fights to preserve original versions, but most people never check. History has become editable, and most of us don't notice. Perhaps Orwell's most precise prediction was this line: "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears." It was their final, most essential command. He was describing gaslighting before the term existed. He was describing the denial of objective reality, the insistence that truth is whatever power says it is. In 2016, a senior White House advisor coined the term alternative facts. In 2024, we live in an era where partisan media outlets broadcast contradictory realities, where the same event is simultaneously proof of conspiracy and proof of conspiracy theories, where fake news means news I don't like. Orwell saw it coming. He saw that the death of objective truth would be achieved not through force, but through exhaustion. People would simply get too tired to fight over what's real. But Orwell got things wrong too, importantly wrong. His biggest mistake was assuming that surveillance would be imposed. He imagined a totalitarian state forcing telescreens into homes, forcing citizens to accept monitoring. What he didn't predict was that surveillance would be sold as convenience, as entertainment, as connection. No one forced us to buy Alexa. No one mandated Ring doorbells. No one required us to install apps that track our location, monitor our health, record our conversations, and sell our data to advertisers. We did this voluntarily, often enthusiastically. The surveillance state Orwell feared was built by corporations, not governments, and we paid them to build it. His second error was thinking the system would be purely political. He imagined surveillance serving the state's need for control. What he missed was that surveillance would be economically profitable. Knowing everything about everyone isn't just politically useful. It's the foundation of a trillion-dollar advertising industry. Data is oil. Privacy is the price of free services. We're not victims of Orwell's nightmare. We're customers. Orwell was a pessimist who underestimated human willingness to trade freedom for comfort. He thought we would resist. He was wrong about that. But he was right about this. The future he described depends on us, on whether we notice, on whether we care, on whether we're willing to be uncomfortable in defense of freedom. That's why he kept typing, even as his lungs failed. That's why he died trying to finish the warning. The question is whether anyone's listening. The blind prophet who saw too much. Aldous Huxley could barely see. By his 16th birthday, an illness had destroyed most of his vision. He lived in a fog of shapes and shadows, dependent on others to read to him, to guide him through rooms, to describe the world he could no longer perceive clearly. And yet this nearly blind man saw the future with terrifying clarity. His first wife, Maria, became his eyes. She read newspapers, books, letters aloud. She described people's faces, their expressions, their body language. Without her, Huxley would have been intellectually isolated. With her, he consumed information voraciously, synthesizing ideas from biology, psychology, philosophy, literature. His blindness forced him to think rather than simply observe. And what he thought about was control. How easy it would be to control humans if you understood their biology and psychology well enough. In 1931, while Huxley was traveling to America by ship, he found a book in the ship's library, My Life and Work, by Henry Ford. Reading it, or rather, having Maria read it to him, was a revelation. Ford described his assembly line system, the efficiency of standardization, the beauty of reducing complex human work to simple, repeatable actions. Workers became interchangeable parts. Production became predictable. Huxley extrapolated. If you could apply industrial principles to manufacturing, why not to human beings themselves? Why not to society? When the ship reached California, Huxley was shocked by what he encountered. American youth culture was loud, sexualized, obsessed with entertainment and consumption. Jazz music, flappers, advertising everywhere, promising happiness through products. The whole society seemed engineered for distraction, for pleasure, for the avoidance of serious thought. He was horrified, and fascinated, and inspired. Within months of returning to England, he began writing Brave New World. The book poured out of him, a vision of a future where Ford's industrial principles were applied to human reproduction, where people were manufactured in bottles, where pleasure replaced pain so completely that no one wanted freedom anymore. The novel was published in 1932. It was reviewed as clever satire, as speculative science fiction, as social criticism. But Huxley knew it was something else, a blueprint. 17 years later, in October of 1949, Huxley forced his failing eyes to read a newly published novel from England, George Orwell's 1984. It took him days with Maria's help, but he finished it. And then he did something extraordinary. He wrote Orwell a letter. The letter, dated October 21st, 1949, is one of the most important documents in 20th century literature. Huxley begins by praising Orwell's novel, profound and important, but then he delivers his critique. Whether in actual fact the policy of the boot on the face can go on indefinitely seems doubtful. My own belief is that the ruling oligarchy will find less arduous and wasteful ways of governing and of satisfying its lust for power, and these ways will resemble those which I described in Brave New World. Translation: torture and terror are exhausting. Pleasure and distraction are sustainable. He continues, within the next generation, I believe that the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning and narco-hypnosis are more efficient as instruments of government than clubs and prisons, and that the lust for power can be just as completely satisfied by suggesting people into loving their servitude as by flogging them and kicking them into obedience. Read that again. Suggesting people into loving their servitude, not forcing, suggesting. Huxley's final punch. I feel that the nightmare of 1984 is destined to modulate into the nightmare of a world having more resemblance to that which I imagined in Brave New World. The change will be brought about as a result of a felt need for increased efficiency. Efficiency. That word again. Ford's word. The word that justifies every reduction of human complexity into manageable simplicity. Orwell responded briefly, politely. He didn't disagree with Huxley's logic, but by then, Orwell was already dying. He had months left. The debate would continue without him. And Huxley would spend the rest of his life proving his own thesis. In May of 1953, Huxley ingested 0.4 of a gram of mescaline under the supervision of psychiatrist Humphrey Osmond. Osmond was nervous. Huxley was a famous intellectual, and giving him a powerful psychedelic could ruin both their reputations if something went wrong. Nothing went wrong. Everything went right, from Huxley's perspective. He spent hours in what he described as a state of mystical transcendence, perceiving reality without the filters of language and ego. He saw, he said, the Godhead, the beatific vision. When he came down, he was convinced. Chemistry could alter consciousness profoundly and reliably. And if chemistry could do that, then chemistry could be used to control consciousness. This wasn't paranoia. This was confirmation of his thesis. In Brave New World, he had invented Soma, a drug with no side effects, no hangovers, just pure pleasure and compliance. It seemed absurd in 1932. In 1953, after his mescaline experience, it seemed inevitable. He wrote an essay about the experience, The Doors of Perception, published in 1954. The media panicked. Was Huxley advocating drug use? Was he trying to corrupt youth? Columbia University invited him to speak, then disinvited him under pressure. The irony, the man who warned about pleasure as a tool of control was being censored for exploring pleasure. But here's the deeper irony. Huxley's Soma was inspired by a real substance. In ancient Hindu Vedic texts, Soma was a ritual drink that induced euphoria and spiritual insight. The recipe is lost, but the concept remained. Huxley simply imagined a perfected version, a drug that made people docile without making them dysfunctional. We have that now, not in pill form exactly, but in algorithmic form. Social media is engineered to be addictive. Dopamine hits from likes and shares. Infinite scroll, autoplay. Recommendation engines that learn what keeps you engaged and feed you more of it. You don't need to take a pill when you can take out your phone. You don't need Soma when you have TikTok. Streaming services ensure you're never bored. Video games provide achievement without accomplishment. Pornography provides intimacy without vulnerability. We have built a society of pleasure on demand, and most of us use these tools daily, hourly, constantly. Huxley predicted this. Not the specific technologies, but the principle. If you make servitude pleasurable enough, people will choose it. But Huxley's most uncanny prediction was about biology itself. In Brave New World, humans are manufactured in hatcheries. Embryos are manipulated to create different castes, alphas for leadership, betas for skilled work, gammas and deltas, and epsilons for menial labor. Everyone is designed for their role. No one questions the system because they were literally built for it. In December of 2023, the FDA approved Casgevy, the first CRISPR-based gene therapy. It treats sickle cell disease by editing the genes in a patient's blood cells. For the first time in history, humans are receiving genetically edited cells as medical treatment. This is good news. It's a cure for a terrible disease. But it's also proof of concept. We can edit human genes. We can change what we are at the molecular level. Huxley saw this coming 90 years ago. He didn't know the mechanism. CRISPR hadn't been discovered. But he understood the principle. If humans can be manufactured, they will be. If genes can be edited, they will be. If control can be biological, it will be. So far, we're using this power for good. But Huxley's warning was never about the first use of a technology. It was about the eventual use. It was about what happens when efficiency becomes the highest value, when optimization replaces ethics, when we decide that engineering humans is preferable to educating them. We're not there yet, but the path Huxley described is visible from here. Huxley lived until 1963. On his deathbed, unable to speak, he wrote a note to his second wife, Laura. LSD 100 micrograms, intramuscular. She injected him. He spent his final hours in a psychedelic state, dying as he had lived, exploring consciousness, seeking transcendence, trying to see beyond the veil. Did he die satisfied? Did he think his warning had worked? We'll never know. But I suspect he knew the truth, just as Orwell did. Warnings don't work when the nightmare feels like a dream. Picture this. A young father, working nights, supporting his family by writing pulp science fiction for magazines that pay a cent per word. He wants to write something important, something that matters. But he has two small daughters who bang on the garage window when they see him working, demanding attention, and he loves them too much to ignore them. So Ray Bradbury walks to the UCLA library, descends into the basement, and finds rows of typewriters available for rent. 10 cents buys 30 minutes. He sits down, feeds a dime into the slot, and begins to type. He writes in bursts. 30 minutes of fury, then the typewriter locks. Another dime. Another 30 minutes. The click of keys. The bell at the end of each line. The mechanical return. No distractions. No daughters. Just the story pouring out of him. 10 cents at a time. When he finishes, he tallies the cost. 49 hours of work, $9.80 in dimes. This is how Fahrenheit 451 was written. Not in a romantic garret, not in a comfortable study. In a basement, on a coin-operated machine, by a man who couldn't afford distraction. The irony is perfect. A novel about the value of books, written in the bowels of a library by someone feeding coins into a machine. The medium was the message. Literature is valuable precisely because it's difficult, because it requires attention, because it can't be consumed passively. But Fahrenheit 451 didn't start as a novel. It started with a police encounter. In 1949, Bradbury was walking through Los Angeles with a friend after midnight. They were talking, enjoying the night air. A police car pulled up. "What are you doing?" the officer demanded. Bradbury, never one to resist a smart remark, replied, "Putting one foot in front of the other." The officers didn't appreciate the humor. They questioned him, suspicious of anyone walking for no purpose. Walking, they implied, was strange, suspicious, possibly criminal. Bradbury was shaken, not because he'd been threatened, he hadn't been, but because the encounter revealed something about society. Walking for its own sake had become aberrant behavior. Movement without economic purpose was suspicious. Simply existing in public space, unattached to commerce or labor, was enough to warrant police attention. He turned that encounter into a short story. The Pedestrian, published in 1951. The protagonist, Leonard Mead, walks through empty streets while everyone else sits inside watching television. When police stop him, he can't explain his behavior in terms they understand. Walking for pleasure? That's not a reason. That's a symptom. The character of Leonard Mead evolved. Bradbury expanded the world. What if the police didn't just question walkers? What if they burned books? What if the whole society had decided that reading was dangerous, that thinking was antisocial, that entertainment was preferable to education? The Fireman was published in Galaxy Science Fiction in February 1951. It was the prototype, a shorter version of what would become Fahrenheit 451. But Bradbury needed a full novel. He needed space to explore the world. So he returned to that UCLA basement, fed more dimes into the machine, and expanded the story. When it came time to choose a title, Bradbury wanted something specific, something visceral. He called the Los Angeles Fire Department and asked, "At what temperature does paper burn?" The answer, 451 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect. Specific enough to sound scientific. Memorable enough to become iconic. The title itself is a warning. This is the temperature at which knowledge burns. And the names, Bradbury was clever with names. The protagonist is Guy Montag. Montag is a German paper company. The mentor figure is Professor Faber. Faber is a German pencil manufacturer. The antagonist, Captain Beatty, has a name that sounds like beat, to strike, to defeat, to conform. Every name in the novel is a small text about paper, writing, and the destruction of both. The novel was published in 1953, and the timing mattered. America, in the early 50s, was terrified. Senator Joseph McCarthy led hearings hunting for communists in government, entertainment, education. Blacklists destroyed careers. Loyalty oaths were required. Books were scrutinized for subversive content. Libraries removed volumes deemed un-American. This was the context for Fahrenheit 451. Bradbury was writing about a fictional future where books are burned, but he was living in a present where books were banned. The dystopia wasn't speculative, it was exaggerated reality. But Bradbury's target wasn't just government censorship, it was something broader. Cultural anti-intellectualism. In the novel, Captain Beatty explains that the government didn't impose book burning. The people demanded it. Different groups found different books offensive. Conservatives wanted to ban books about race. Progressives wanted to ban books about gender. Religious groups wanted to ban books about science. Everyone had a list of what shouldn't be read. So eventually, to keep everyone happy, society just banned all books. This is the darkest insight of Fahrenheit 451. Censorship is democratic. It's not imposed by tyrants. It's voted for by citizens who find thinking unpleasant and entertainment easier. And Bradbury predicted how this would happen. In the novel, people sit in rooms surrounded by wall-sized television screens, watching interactive programs that give them the illusion of participation. They wear thimble radios in their ears, receiving constant audio input. They're never alone with their thoughts. They're never bored. And they're never free. Bradbury wrote this in 1953. Plasma televisions weren't invented until 1997. Wireless earbuds arrived in the 2010s, but Bradbury saw them coming because he understood the principle. Technology will always move toward immersive distraction. He predicted that media would become more sensational, more emotional, less analytical. Reality television, TikTok, YouTube algorithms optimized for engagement. All of this flows from Bradbury's insight that entertainment is more profitable than information. He predicted longer working hours for less pay. In the novel, Montag's wife Mildred is exhausted despite doing little. The economy demands constant labor, constant consumption, constant distraction. Sound familiar? He predicted that speed would replace depth. In the novel, cars travel so fast that billboards have to be 300 feet long so drivers can read them. Information is compressed into slogans. Thought is replaced with reaction. We live in this world now. We call it social media. But here's where Bradbury's life becomes a perfect irony. A story so perfect, I almost don't believe it. In 1967, Ballantine Books published a special edition of Fahrenheit 451 for high schools. They called it the Bal High Edition. They marketed it as appropriate for students. And they censored it. 75 separate passages were altered. The word hell became heck. Damn was removed. Abortion was replaced with cesarean. A drunk man became a sick man. Cleaning a navel became cleaning ears. For 12 years, from 1967 to 1979, this Baudelarized version was the only edition in print. The original was out of circulation. Students across America read a censored version of a novel about censorship. Bradbury didn't know. No one told him. Publishers made the changes without informing the author. In 1979, a friend showed Bradbury a copy of the Bal High edition. He was horrified. He demanded that Ballantine restore the original text immediately. They complied, and in 1980, the full version returned to print. Bradbury wrote a new coda, added to the 1979 edition. There is more than one way to burn a book, and the world is full of people running about with lit matches. The book that warned about censorship was censored. The prophecy fulfilled itself. The irony is so complete, it feels orchestrated. But Bradbury had one more twist in his message, one that most readers miss. In later interviews, Bradbury insisted that Fahrenheit 451 isn't primarily about government censorship. It's about something worse, voluntary ignorance. The real message, he said, is about television. The real message is that people will stop reading of their own free will. You don't have to burn books if no one wants to read them. In the novel, Captain Beatty, the fire chief who burns books, explains this explicitly. He tells Montag that the government didn't ban books. People just stopped caring. Television was easier. Entertainment was more fun. Thinking was work. It didn't come from the government down, Beatty says. There was no dictum, no declaration, no censorship to start with. No. Technology, mass exploitation, and minority pressure carried the trick. Minority pressure. That phrase is key. Every group found some book offensive. Every faction wanted something banned. So, to avoid offending anyone, society banned everything. We're watching this happen now. Books are challenged in school libraries from both left and right. Conservative groups want to remove books with LGBTQ themes. Progressive groups want to remove books with racial slurs, even classics like Huckleberry Finn. Everyone has a list of what children shouldn't read. And the easiest solution, the solution that avoids controversy, is to just remove books entirely. Replace them with tablets. Replace reading with videos. Replace thought with content. Bradbury saw this coming. He saw that democracy could vote itself into ignorance. He saw that freedom includes the freedom to choose servitude, as long as servitude is entertaining enough. This is why Fahrenheit 451 matters more now than when it was written. We live in Bradbury's world. We carry the screens. We wear the earbuds. We choose distraction over depth every single day. The books aren't burning, we're just not reading them. And that, Bradbury warned, is worse. In October 1949, a nearly blind man finished reading a novel about a boot stamping on a human face forever. Aldous Huxley put down Orwell's 1984 and wrote a letter that would define the future we're living in now. His message was simple. Torture is expensive. Pleasure is sustainable. Within the next generation, I believe that the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning and narco-hypnosis are more efficient as instruments of government than clubs and prisons. Huxley predicted that Orwell's nightmare would modulate into his own, that boots would give way to soma, that surveillance would be sold instead of imposed, that we would be made to love our servitude. He was right, but only partially. Because the genius of modern control is that it uses both, fear and pleasure, surveillance and entertainment, the stick and the drug. Look at China. They have Orwell's surveillance, facial recognition everywhere, social credit scores, internet censorship, detention camps. But they also have Huxley's pleasure. TikTok was invented there before spreading globally. E-commerce is seamless. Food delivery, ride-sharing, mobile payments, all convenient, all addictive, all tracking you. The system uses fear to prevent rebellion and pleasure to prevent the desire to rebel. It's Orwell plus Huxley. And it works. Look at the West. We have Huxley's nightmare, smartphones that feed us dopamine, streaming services that eliminate boredom, algorithms that predict what we want before we know we want it. But we also have Orwell's surveillance. Everything tracked, everything recorded, everything analyzed and sold. We weren't forced to install it. We paid for it. Monthly subscriptions for our own monitoring. The difference is packaging. China's system is explicit. Behave or suffer consequences. The West's system is implicit. Consume and be comfortable. But both achieve the same result: compliance. In 1985, media theorist Neil Postman crystallized this. Orwell feared those who would deprive us of information. Huxley feared those who would give us so much that we would be reduced to passivity. Orwell feared the truth would be concealed from us. Huxley feared the truth would be drowned in a sea of irrelevance. Both futures arrived. They're not alternatives, they're complements. You're watched, but you're too entertained to care. You're controlled, but you're too comfortable to resist. The screens that distract you are the same screens that surveil you. The algorithm that recommends your content is the same algorithm that profiles your behavior. Entertainment covers for surveillance. Surveillance ensures compliance when entertainment fails. And the most disturbing part? This hybrid system is more stable than either pure dystopia. Orwell's boot-on-face requires constant violence, which is exhausting and expensive. Huxley's pleasure-only world would lack the enforcement mechanisms for true control. But combine them? Perfect. The pleasure keeps you docile. The surveillance catches you if you wake up. Both prophets understood that control depends on psychology, not technology. The tools change. Telescreens become smartphones, Soma becomes social media, but the human vulnerabilities remain constant. We want certainty more than truth. We want pleasure more than meaning. We want convenience more than freedom. That's not a flaw to be fixed. That's human nature to be exploited. And we are being exploited, every day, by systems designed by very smart people with unlimited resources and detailed psychological research. The question both authors asked remains: will you notice? Will you care? Will you resist? Because the future they feared isn't coming. It's here. And most of us are too comfortable, too entertained, too surveilled to see it. So what do we do with all this? 3 men, decades ago, saw versions of now. They didn't see every detail, but they saw the shape of things, and they tried to warn us. And we didn't listen. Or we listened but didn't care. Or we cared but found the warnings less compelling than the convenience of the nightmare. Here's what they got right. Surveillance is real. This is Orwell's legacy. Your location is tracked. Your purchases are recorded. Your face is recognizable to machines. Your conversations are processed for keywords. Your search history is profiled. Your social connections are mapped. But it's not imposed, it's sold. You bought the device that tracks you. You installed the app that listens. You agreed to terms of service you didn't read. The solution isn't to smash your phone. It's to notice, to recognize that every convenience has a cost, to make the trade consciously, not reflexively. Pleasure is control. This is Huxley's legacy. Entertainment is infinite. Streaming services eliminate boredom. Social media provides connection without vulnerability. Food, sex, games, content, all available instantly, algorithmically optimized to keep you engaged. But engagement isn't fulfillment. It's pacification. You're not happy. You're distracted from unhappiness. There's a difference. The solution isn't to reject pleasure. It's to notice when pleasure becomes compulsion. To recognize when you're scrolling not because you want to, but because you can't stop. To build friction back into your life. Moments of boredom, of difficulty, of unoptimized time. Attention is the resource. This is Bradbury's legacy. Books aren't burning. They're being ignored. Information isn't scarce. It's overwhelming. The problem isn't that we can't access knowledge. It's that we can't process it. You will never read all the books you want to read. You will never watch all the shows people recommend. The content is infinite. Your time is not. So the question isn't, what should I consume? The question is, what deserves my attention? If you let the algorithm decide, you lose agency. If you consume whatever appears in your feed, you're not choosing. You're being chosen for. Your attention becomes a resource extracted by others for their profit. The solution isn't to consume less, necessarily. It's to consume deliberately, to choose, to prioritize depth over breadth, quality over quantity, meaning over novelty. Here's the synthesis. You are surveilled. Notice it. Decide if the trade is worth it. You are distracted. Notice it. Choose what deserves your focus. You are manipulated. Notice it. Resist when resistance matters. The common thread is consciousness. The antidote to all three dystopias is paying attention. Not to your phone, but to yourself. To how you spend time. To what you value. To whether your choices reflect your intentions or someone else's design. The practical advice: protect your attention. It's finite. It's valuable. It's under attack. Build barriers. Turn off notifications. Delete apps you use compulsively. Create friction between impulse and action. Make distractions slightly harder and depth slightly easier. Choose discomfort deliberately. Boredom is not an emergency. Anxiety is not a catastrophe. Difficulty is not a problem to be solved with entertainment. The capacity to sit with discomfort is the capacity for growth. Schedule boredom. Take walks without podcasts. Sit without scrolling. Let your mind wander. Read. Slowly. Deeply. Repeatedly. Books are the antidote to the frantic pace of digital information. They require sustained attention. They reward depth over speed. They don't refresh. They don't update. They just sit there, waiting for you to do the work of understanding. Question convenience. Every time something is made easier, ask what you're losing. One-click shopping bypasses consideration. Autoplay surrenders agency. Personalization creates filter bubbles. Convenience is valuable. But so is effort. So is intentionality. So is the friction that makes you pause and choose. Recognize you are not immune. No one is. The systems designed to capture your attention were built by very smart people with massive resources and detailed psychological research. You're not weak for falling for it. You're human. But recognizing that you're susceptible is the first step to resistance. Orwell's final words to his publisher: "Don't let it happen. It depends on you." Not on governments, not on corporations, on you, on individual choices, repeated daily, compounded over time. Huxley's warning: people will be made to love their servitude. The most effective tyranny is the one that feels like freedom. So ask yourself, do I love this? Or do I love being told I should love this? Bradbury's revelation, Fahrenheit 451, isn't about government censorship. It's about people choosing not to read, choosing entertainment over effort, choosing easy over meaningful. The books aren't burning, you're just not opening them. These dystopias were written as warnings, not inevitabilities. The future is not fixed. The trajectory we're on can be changed, but only if enough people notice, care, and resist. Orwell died believing he failed. Huxley died believing his warnings came true faster than he expected. Bradbury died watching people choose screens over books. But their books survived. Their warnings are still read. And every person who reads them and thinks, "I won't let this happen to me," is a small act of resistance. That's all it takes. Not revolution, not grand gestures, just individuals, choosing attention over distraction, depth over ease, thought over reaction. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one book at a time. Don't let it happen. It depends on you.